Hello, everyone. Welcome to Or This. This is my Monday morning quarterbacking of the scriptures and the sermon for the previous Sunday, and this video is for Sunday, July 19th. The scriptures assigned for today, or for this particular week, were Isaiah 44, verses 6 through 8, Psalm 86, verses 11 through 17, Romans chapter 8, verses 12 to 25, and Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 to 30, and verses 36 to 43. I really centered in on the gospel, and I'm going to continue to talk about the gospel because it contained a parable for us. And the parable of the wheat and the weeds. And the parable was basically a man sowed good seed in his field to grow wheat, and then overnight somebody came in and sowed bad seed to grow weeds. And so the servants went to the master and said, "Hey, this stuff is coming up. We know you only planted good seed. Should we pull it up?" And the master said, "No, let if you try to pull out the weeds, you might risk pulling out the wheat. So let both grow together until the harvest, and then at the harvest go through and take out and separate them out," basically. And then Jesus went on later on with an explanation of basically what this all represents, which is probably a little easier to understand maybe than some of the other parables, at least to understand what each thing is representing. And in this case, it seems to be a bit allegorical, because the way Jesus explains it is allegorical, meaning each thing represents something. So the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The one who sows the bad seed is the devil. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one. So each thing has a something that it represents. Conclusion I came to with my sermon was the idea that for people in Jesus' day who felt like there was nothing but evil going on around them because they were suffering, because they were treated unjustly, they were treated there was a lot of inequality, and all they had was the Roman Empire taxing them ridiculously. That this parable was actually a word of hope to say that while you feel like you're in a field where everything is evil weeds, there is the kingdom of God growing in your midst. And so the knowing that the kingdom of God is also growing in your midst is something to give hope to those who were only seeing evil and the impact of evil on their lives and on the lives of one another. However, I did acknowledge during the sermon how hard it is to think about having certain people that are definitely wheat and people who are definitely weeds, people who are definitely good planting and people who are definitely weeds, and evil. We don't have that kind of black and white situation. It doesn't seem to work that way because we all have a little bit of good and bad in us. We kind of all, even though we've got bad in us, our faith is what saves us, right? Jesus' death and resurrection is what saves us. So I did say talking about this idea of how we aren't all one thing or the other. You can really get into the weeds, pun intended, trying to think all of that through. Well, then my brain really got into the weeds as I thought about things during the service, because the world itself also is full of both good and and evil, right? And in general, we try to make sure that evil can't harm people. And so if there's an effort where we think evil is harming somebody, you've got law enforcement to try to make sure that harm can't happen anymore. There's ways to, when there's abuse, to try to help somebody get out of abusive relationships so they can't be treated that way anymore. There's, laws and all this kind of stuff to try to separate out the evil from those who could be harmed by that evil. But even in that, it's not always cut and dry. And the situation that I was seeing as impacting this, or now, had to do with some of the conflicts going on and how complicated conversations are about conflicts in these places. So things have picked up with Iran again. And there's been a lot of conversation about the necessity for what is going on in Iran, and how much good is coming, how much evil was happening, and yet how much good is going to come out of what is of the conflict that we started, with the intention of trying to stop the evil. The other conflict, and that's all things to talk about. The other conflict is what's going on in Gaza, and the way in which, while what seems to be the idea is trying to root out Hamas and the evil that they perpetrate, because they certainly do evil towards Israel, but they also kind of do evil towards the people, the Palestinians. And yet it seems to have become a bigger challenge in trying to root them out, in rooting out the evil, when the evil doesn't want to, is willing to use human beings as a shield, then you do it more harm to to innocent human beings. And that becomes a very complicated situation, to figure out how much. So thus, that is the question: how much weeding can be done to bring about relief for the innocent, for the good, and how much of the weeding can actually uproot and harm what is good. Going back to any kind of conflict or war like we have with Iran, that's probably the kind of discussion that happened when they were developing the just war theory. The just war theory is what tries to determine how much good is going to come from what is going to be done, and is it enough to justify the destruction that is going to be done. And so that the idea of the image of wheat and weeds, and how much do you let them grow together, and when do you pull the evil out, when do you weed out the evil, that is a complicated question for us in everyday life. The other place where this is happening, and right in front of us, or right around us, is in the immigration crackdown in the United States. The idea originally, as presented, was to get rid of the criminal undocumented so that they can't perpetrate evil deeds to our citizens. But what has been happening is people who are not doing anything wrong, anything bad, who are working, who are taking care of families, contributing to their communities, are being uprooted. Their lives are being uprooted in this effort. And so the question then becomes, this kind of approach, is it doing more harm or is it doing more good? And those are important conversations to have when you're trying to basically uproot what's bad or what is evil. There's certainly more than one way to do that, but it's something that needs to be discussed, because just as in the parable, and in life, I mean, if you weed your garden, there are times when you could possibly accidentally uproot something you meant to keep, but when you try to pull out the weeds. Well, that's really a metaphor for how it is in life as well. And so we would do well to be willing to have those kinds of conversations, to undertake efforts, and faith communities maybe should facilitate leaders having these kinds of conversations when any kind of large-scale decisions that might impact lots of people's lives are going to happen. So those were some things that were kind of going through my mind, and there's I'm sure you might also be able to think of some situations in which there is a challenge in trying to uproot a particular bad or evil thing, and it's going to have a wider impact. And so it becomes a challenge and a time of discernment to figure out how to do that without uprooting people who are hurting or people who are innocent or those kinds of things. So yeah, lots to think about in this parable. The parable certainly made me think about a lot of things, and yet the conclusion that I presented to this congregation at the sermon on Sunday was yet more impactful for me. Is that idea that if you look around and you feel like all you're seeing is evil being perpetrated, to remember that we are not living in a field of weeds. We are living in a place where the wheat is growing, where the kingdom of God is growing around us, even as the evil deeds are around us. And we can look around and be aware, and we will see the kingdom of God growing in the midst. Evil will not take over. Evil does not have the last word. God's kingdom is growing, and it is here, and nothing will take it away. And I think that's the big takeaway for us. Other than that, in all things, we ask God for discernment, and God is here to guide us and to help us to see things in a different way. So those are some thoughts that I had, and I'd be glad to hear some of yours. So please feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments. And I thank you so much for watching. God bless.